47 miles of Isthmian rock, jungle, river, and lowland connecting two oceans. It required moving more earth than any human construction project in history to that point. It required the labor of tens of thousands, most of them not American, most of them not recorded by name in the official histories. It also required, before the first shovel broke ground, a revolution, a treaty, and, not surprisingly, a Marine Corps landing. This episode is about what came before the canal, about the agreement that made it possible, and who negotiated it, and under what circumstances. This is Farms and Frontlines. I am your host, Max Terzano, joined as always by Jessica Rudo.
Hello.
And last episode, we talked about Cuba, a clause embedded in a constitution, a republic with conditions attached. And this episode, we find ourselves in Panama, November 1903. A new republic declared independence from Colombia. Within 15 days, it had signed a treaty granting another nation sovereign rights over a corridor running through the center of its territory. The canal that would be built in the corridor is one of the engineering achievements of the 20th century. I would say one of the great engineering achievements of the 20th century, if not all time.
Not
just one of them. Yes. That doesn't really explain the real weight of it. This episode is about the political and economic arrangements that preceded it. Jess, we talked about Cuba last episode and about the Roosevelt Corollary and how kind of like, what was the word? Not empire, not expansionism, but like you said, manifest destiny was a thing, but imperialism wasn't a thing quite yet. But we're kind of getting there, right? And this is leading up to that. So do you want to go take us through? We talked about it a little bit when we had our last Panama episode. That was focusing on something completely different. This is more of the history of Panama, how the U.S. got involved in the canal, all that good stuff. Do you want to just take it away from, how we got started in Panama?
Sure. The idea of a canal through Central America predates the United States itself. When Spanish conquistadors first landed in Mexico, they eventually go down into Central America, and they start looking, even back in 1600s, at the Isthmus. So I will point out that I cannot say that word still. Last time I blamed it on my braces. I don't have braces now, but I can't really say it. The Isthmus in the 16th century, 17th century-ish. But by the 19th century, the question is still, where can we put a canal? And then who is going to control it?
Right.
Which is kind of crazy because I don't know if you saw the news today.
Yep.
It's not a canal, but Mexico it looks like it's going to go through with building a transcontinental railroad, starting at one port, taking it to the other port.
I mean, that makes sense, I think.
Well,
for Mexico, I guess. But
yeah,
that's a lot of logistics and
a lot of infrastructure, a lot of things that would have to go into that. But I think it's interesting because that's what comes first in Panama. The railroad comes first. In 1846, Washington signed an agreement with New Granada. So New Granada is, if you're looking at the map now, it's basically Colombia and Panama. It was one country called New Granada. Okay. And before that, it had more countries, but like South American countries got independence. New Granada got smaller. 1846, Washington signed an agreement with New Granada, which was Panama and Colombia, called the Treaty of Peace, Friendship, Navigation, and Commerce, known as the Bidlack-Malario Treaty. So those...
Malarino.
What?
There's an N in there. There's an N in there. The Bidlack-Malaria Treaty.
Malarino Treaty. The last names of the people involved with making the treaty.
Gotcha.
Should only be Smith and Jones because that's what.
Come on.
The agreement was framed as mutual. American citizens and goods received the right to transit across the isthmus. In return, the United States guaranteed the neutrality of the route and New Granada's sovereignty over it. One provision. So it is because one of the things that the U.S. is going to do is like clamp down on independence movements. So I'm going to do a little flip-flop in a minute. One provision gave the United States the authority to use military force to maintain order on the Isthmus, a clause that would be invoked to suppress civil conflicts, including independence movements against Colombian rule over the following decades.
Between 1846 and 1903, the United States intervened militarily on the Isthmus of Panama at least 13 times, sometimes at the request of Colombian authorities, sometimes without waiting to be asked. The pattern was consistent: civil unrest on the Isthmus, actual or anticipated disruption to the transit route, and a Marine or Navy landing to protect American lives and property. The Bidlack-Mallarino Treaty was the legal mechanism. The railroad, and later the canal, were the economic interests it protected. John Lindsay Poland, Emperors in the Jungle, The Hidden History of the U.S. in Panama, Duke University Press, 2003.
The railroad came first. I was saying Mexico today, St. Patrick's Day, the news was saying that they have plans to build a transcontinental railroad starting from the Gulf of Mexico, because it would be their coast, to the Pacific. So huge for Mexico. Lots of good things could come out of that for sure.
100%.
And then not to replace the Panama Canal, but would definitely
another option, I guess.
Yeah. But I think it's interesting because in Panama, the railroad came first. So it's completed in 1855 by a New York finance corporation. And they're just three independent investors that are in New York. There's no Citibank or something that we would know today. Was the first transcontinental railroad in the Americas, predating the U.S. transcontinental by 14 years. It made the Isthmus for the first time a reliably monetizable transit corridor. Yeah.
I just love that, like, just the importance of railroads throughout history. Like, something you barely touch on. I know in growing up would be like, and then they built the Transcontinental Railroad. Anyway, we're on to the next chapter. It's like,
I mean,
that was a massive undertaking.
Right. My great grandfather worked on the railroad, and so
really?
Yeah, from Italy, he lands in Brooklyn, and then he follows the railroad job into Necon, and that's where Grandpa Ben, that's where he grew up. Yeah.
Oh, that's so cool.
That's why he was in Necon for the railroads.
That's cool. That makes sense.
Yeah, so you're right. There's a ton of history behind the railroads, and a lot of United States prosperity is due to railroads and what they're able to connect.
Just a massive undertaking to go across the entire United States with a railroad.
Yeah.
I don't remember, but it was a president, wasn't it, who like drove the golden spike in the middle?
Yeah, right in the middle. Who was that?
Yeah, I want to say Abe Lincoln, but I don't think that's
I was also going to say Abe Lincoln, but I don't know if that's true or not.
Yeah, that's what I don't know. Never mind. It was Leland Stanford.
Leland Stanford. Oh, yeah,
Which is
Central Pacific President Leland Stanford, but it was Grant who was in office at the time.
Interesting. A promontory point. Leland Stanford of Stanford University.
Oh.
Connecting the dots. The story of the Panama Canal begins not with Theodore Roosevelt, but with the Panama Railroad, the first major U.S. infrastructure investment in the region. The railroad's owners, backed by New York capital, secured the Bidlack Treaty's transit rights and proceeded to shape the political economy of the Isthmus for a generation before the canal question became acute. When canal promoters came looking for rights of way and political arrangements in the 1870s and 1880s, they were building on a foundation already laid. David McCullough, The Path Between Seas, The Creation of the Panama Canal, 1870 through 1914. Simon & Schuster, 1977.
So France tried first. The Compagnie Universelle du Canal Interoceanique, the company that had completed the Suez Canal, began work in 1881 under Ferdinand de Lesseps, and he's the same engineer for the Suez Canal. The French effort collapsed in 1889 after nearly a decade of construction. Yellow fever and malaria killed an estimated 20,000 workers, most of them recruited from the Caribbean. The project's failure also produced one of the largest financial scandals in the 19th century, wiping out savings of roughly 800,000 French investors. I don't know if you remember this, including Mr. Eiffel from the Eiffel Tower.
Yep. I remember we talked about that. If you want to hear more and didn't listen to our previous episode on Panama, we go into that a little bit more on that.
Yep. When the French effort ended, The partially completed infrastructure and the legal rights to the canal route passed to a successor company. What happened to those assets and who would profit from their transfer would shape the diplomacy of the next decade. The United States, meanwhile, had been debating two routes, Nicaragua and Panama. Congress debated both. By 1902, it had voted for Panama. The machinery of treaty negotiations turned towards Bogota.
The Hay-Haran Treaty, negotiated with Colombia and signed in January 1903, would have given the United States a renewable 100-year lease over a canal zone in exchange for $10 million and an annual payment of $250,000. That's a lot of money.
That's a lot of money, yeah.
That's a lot of money. The Colombian Senate rejected it in August 1903.
I do just want to point out, they sat on that for like 7-8 months.
I was going to say, that's a long time to be thinking about it, because, I mean...
Right.
Yeah.
This is going to add to Teddy Roosevelt. Hold on. You'll get to it, but yeah.
Taking a long time here.
Mm-hmm.
The Colombian Senate rejected it in August 1903. Colombian legislators raised several objections. The compensation was considered insufficient. The sovereignty concessions were considered too broad, and some senators believed a better arrangement could be negotiated, or that waiting for the French concession to expire would give Colombia direct control over the assets. Theodore Roosevelt had been following the Colombian deliberations closely. In a private letter to Secretary of State John Hay that August, he described the Colombian Senate's position in language he would not have used in public.
I do not think the Bogota lot of jackrabbits should be allowed to bar one of the future highways of civilization. We may have to give a lesson to these jackrabbits.
The letter was not published at the time. Roosevelt's administration continued diplomatic channels publicly, while by several accounts, monitoring developments in Panama closely. Felipe Bonavaria, a French engineer who had worked on the original de Lesseps project, had been actively lobbying Washington throughout 1903. He held a significant personal stake in the outcome. The French New Panama Canal Company, which still held the rights, equipment, and surveys from the failed effort, stood to receive up to $40 million if the United States chose Panama as its route. If the U.S. chose Nicaragua instead, those assets would be worthless.
I do not think the Bogota lot of jackrabbits should be allowed to bar one of the future highways of civilization. We may have to give a lesson to these jackrabbits. Bonavaria had an agenda that was only partly about the canal. The French New Panama Canal Company still held assets, rights, equipment, surveys, that were worth up to $40 million if the United States chose Panama. If it chose Nicaragua, those assets were worthless. His lobbying of Congress and the Roosevelt administration was sophisticated, well-funded, and effective. He became the key intermediary between Panamanian independence conspirators and Washington, without being Panamanian, without having any democratic mandate, and without disclosing the full extent of his financial interests. Matthew Parker, Panama Fever, The Epic Story of the Building of the Panama Canal, Doubleday, 2007.
Independence sentiment in Panama had deep roots. There had been multiple secessionist movements against Colombian rule over the preceding decades. By the fall of 1903, a group of Panamanian civic leaders and businessmen were actively planning another attempt and were in communication with Bonavaria, who was in communication with Washington. The USS Nashville arrived at Cologne on November 2nd, 1903, the day before the planned uprising. Its orders from the Secretary of the Navy were to prevent Colombian troops from moving across the Isthmus.
The order that the Colombian forces on the Atlantic side be not permitted to land, or if already landed, that they be not permitted to proceed to Panama. The Nashville will act to prevent any hostile act on the part of either side. Secretary of the Navy William Moody, cable to commander of USS Nashville, November 2nd, 1903. Cited in Ovidio Diaz Castillo, The Canal, Aspects of the History of Panama.
Panama declared independence on November 3rd. The United States recognized the new republic on November 6th, 3 days later, before any other major power had been consulted and before Colombia had been offered any compensation. Felipe Bonavaria who was not Panamanian, was designated the new republic's minister plenipotentiary to Washington. He was given authority to negotiate and sign the Canal Treaty. He signed it on November 18th, 1903, before the Panamanian diplomatic delegation, which had sailed from Panama City, could reach Washington. That's just kind of crazy, isn't it?
Yeah.
The whole series of events.
Yes, very fast. And it's like, well,
good news, Panamanians. You're a country. We've already let this Frenchman sign your treaty.
I mean, it's signed.
Yeah. Like,
supposedly it counts.
sorry to make you guys come all this way. We already signed it for you.
Yeah. Wait, what?
You did what now?
The Hay-Buna-Barilla Treaty granted the United States control over a 10-mile wide canal zone across the Isthmus in perpetuity. The United States would hold sovereign rights equivalent to those of a territorial government over that strip of land, 5 miles on each side of the canal. The price was the same $10 million that Colombia had rejected, plus an annual payment of $250,000. So it's like, haha, Colombia,
Yeah.
this could have been yours.
Could have been yours, Colombia.
Buna negotiated the treaty in extraordinary haste, before the Panamanian delegation arrived, and with terms more favorable to the United States than anything the Panamanian junta had authorized him to accept. He knew that if the Panamanians arrived and reviewed the terms, the treaty might not be signed. He also knew that his own financial interests, recovering the value of the French company's assets, required an immediate deal. The Panamanian delegation, upon arriving and reading the treaty, was appalled, but it was already signed. John Major, Prized Possession, the United States and the Panama Canal, 1903 through 1979. Cambridge University Press, 1993.
The treaty's core provisions were direct. Article 3 granted the United States all rights, power, and authority within the canal zone to the exclusion of Panamanian sovereignty. The cities of Colón and Panama City at either end of the canal were subject to similar U.S. jurisdiction under certain conditions. And everything in that zone, English, a little tiny U.S. area.
Yeah. Which is really like it's one thing to just say it, but then if you think about it, it's your entire country is split down the middle.
Can I look at a map?
Please do. As soon as I said it, I was like, I actually don't know if it's down the middle.
Isn't it what? Yeah, it is down the middle.
Yes, like I said with confidence, your entire country is split down the middle by people who don't speak your language.
Yeah.
During a time when air travel wasn't a thing. It's just,
yeah.
You know, I don't know. It's a wild thing to think about. I don't know if that's ever happened anywhere else.
I don't know.
Not that I could think of, but
yeah.
through the entire country, it's kind of crazy.
Yeah, and I mean, you know, Spanish could be spoken there, but it was it
wasn't like they were going to be
American. Yeah.
Right.
It was very American in those 5 miles.
The Republic of Panama grants to the United States all the rights, power, and authority within the zone mentioned and described in Article 2 of this agreement, and within the limits of all auxiliary lands and waters mentioned and described in Article 4 of this agreement, to the entire exclusion of the exercise by the Republic of Panama of any such sovereign rights, power, or authority.
The treaty was ratified by the U.S. Senate and by the Panamanian government, the latter, historians note, under the practical constraint that the alternative was losing U.S. recognition and military protection before the new republic had established itself.
Yeah, I mean, if the U.S. left, it was Colombia again, right?
Yeah.
The Hay-Buna Treaty became the single most important grievance in Panamanian political life for the next 70 years. Generations of Panamanian politicians, students, and workers organized against it. The 1964 flag riots, in which Panamanian students attempted to fly their national flag in the canal zone and were met with violence that killed 21 Panamanians and 4 U.S. soldiers, were a direct expression of accumulated tension under the treaty's terms. It would take until 1977, when President Jimmy Carter and the Panamanian General Omar Torrijos signed the Torrijos-Carter treaties, to begin the transfer of sovereignty back to Panama. The canal itself returned to Panamanian control on December 31st, 1999. Michael Conniff, Panama and the United States, The Forced Alliance. Second edition, University of Georgia Press, 2001.
So, construction on the American Canal began in 1904. It was completed in 1914. I mean, it began pretty soon after.
Yes.
The USS Nashville got there in November 1903. 1904, they're already digging, you know? And I guess they had a template because of what the French had already done. But
exactly. And the equipment is there. And yeah.
Right. So it was pretty easy to pick up. Even still, it took a decade before it was completed.
Yeah.
The Culebra Cut alone, which is the 9-mile passage through the Continental Divide, required a decade of blasting and excavation. In total, workers removed more than 230 million cubic yards of earth and rock. You know what? This is completely beside the point. We don't have to get stuck on it. I wonder what happened to all that.
I was literally just thinking that because
Yeah,
I was thinking about how UAE made their own islands.
Mhm.
Man, if they were smart, they could have made their own island.
Right? Like
Yeah.
resort towns. Should have been
I was
thinking
literally
ahead.
just thinking that. Yeah. Where did they put it all? Because they didn't make
Seriously.
walls on the other
Yeah.
side.
So where? I don't know.
I was thinking that.
I don't know. Yeah. All right. Not getting bogged down on it. The workforce that accomplished this was organized under a 2-tier administrative system. The Canal Zone Administration designated workers as either gold roll or silver roll. The designations were officially about the currency in which wages were paid. In practice, gold roll workers were overwhelmingly American, primarily white, and silver roll workers were overwhelmingly Caribbean and Latin American.
The gold and silver designation was officially about currency, not race. But in practice, the correlation was nearly perfect. Gold roll workers were Americans, silver roll workers were West Indians and Latin Americans. The distinctions governed housing, hospitals, recreational facilities, and pay scales. West Indian workers received roughly half the daily wage of American workers for the same category of labor. The racial geography of the Canal Zone, enforced by administrative policy, was Jim Crow transported to the Isthmus. This quote comes from Julie Green, The Canal Builders, Making America's Empire at the Panama Canal. Penguin Press, 2009.
Gold roll is the American currency because American currency was backed by gold.
Gold, yeah.
And the Caribbean currency was backed by silver.
Right. Of the approximately 56,000 workers employed at the canal's peak in 1913, roughly 31,000 were West Indian, most of them from Barbados, Jamaica, and other British Caribbean islands. They came because Canal Zone wages, even on the silver roll, exceeded what was available in the Caribbean labor market at the time. They also came because labor recruiters were sent to the islands specifically to find them. That makes sense.
Found you. All right, come on.
Come on, I'll pay you.
The Barbadian government was initially cooperative with canal labor recruitment, and tens of thousands of Barbadians made the passage to Panama. Many did not return. The death toll among West Indian workers dwarfed that of American workers, not only because of disease and accident, but because West Indian workers were disproportionately assigned to the most dangerous tasks. The official death records are incomplete for silver roll workers. The real number of deaths among Caribbean laborers in the canal's construction is probably significantly higher than the documented figure of roughly 5,600. This passage from Velma Newton, The Silver Men, West Indian Labor Migration to Panama, 1850 to 1914. Ian Randall Publishers, 1984.
The official Canal Zone death records show approximately 5,600 fatalities during the American construction period. Historians working with the Caribbean archival sources consider that figure an undercount, particularly for silver roll workers whose records were less systematically maintained. That's still, 5,600 is still a lot.
Yeah, over 10 years, like
Yeah.
560 a year. Yeah.
Much better than the French
Yeah.
escapades, but
Yeah.
still not great.
It makes me think of the Great Wall of China
Mm-hmm.
and how they just buried people in the
Yeah.
wall.
Just
Yeah.
kept building
It's
over them. Macabre.
Like, it's kind of like, it's hard for my single mind to
My one
comprehend
single human mind.
all of the deaths that are associated, and yet the project continues,
Mhm. Yeah.
It's something. Yeah.
Yeah. I wonder what those conversations were like, if they even had them, like
Yeah. If it was just keep
just
going.
the cost
Yeah.
of business kind of thing.
Right.
So disease was the primary killer. Yellow fever and malaria had destroyed the French effort. The American project confronted the same environment. The response was a sanitation campaign directed by Dr. William Gorgas, the Army's chief sanitation officer on the Isthmus. Gorgas built his program on research completed during the U.S. occupation of Cuba, specifically the work of Walter Reed and the Cuban epidemiologist Carlos Finley, who had established that yellow fever was transmitted by a particular species of mosquito, the Aedes aegypti. You want to have a go with that one, or do you think you're good? Okay.
I just would have skipped it.
The bzzz. Gorgas attacked the mosquito directly with a big fly swatter.
With bullets. He shot the mosquitoes.
As American as he possibly could.
In the face.
If we kill them all, they can't harm us. The Gorgas Mosquito War of 1913. Short-lived. Anyway. Gorgas attacked the mosquito directly, draining standing water, covering water storage with oil to suffocate larvae, screening buildings, fumigating, etc. By 1906, yellow fever had been effectively eliminated from the canal zone. Malaria rates fell sharply.
Gorgas's sanitation campaign is rightly celebrated as a turning point in tropical medicine, but its benefits were unevenly distributed. The canal zone's gold towns, American residential areas, were systematically drained, screened, and treated. Silver towns received less intensive attention. The result was that American workers saw the largest proportional reduction in disease mortality. The achievement was real. The distribution of its benefits reflected the administrative structure of the zone. This passage from John W. Ross and Charles G. Moore. Cross-checking. Disease burden and yellow fever in the Panama Canal construction. American Journal of Tropical Medicine and Hygiene, 2015.
So Gorgas and Walter Reed and Finley were really just responsible for, it's the mosquitoes. We got to get rid of the mosquitoes.
Yeah, I mean, Walter Reed and Carlos Finlay, they figure that out when they're in Cuba. That's why they're working together. And I always think it's good to highlight when that is happening. Like there's some working together. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, that's not, I don't want to gloss over it. That is a huge discovery.
Yeah.
Massive medical find for them to be able to figure it out and then also figure out ways to get around the mosquitoes.
And, it's things that we just take advantage of, or we take for granted. Sorry, not take advantage of. We take for granted screens.
Right,
They started implementing screens, and then it's like, oh, wow, we're not dying. So
yeah. Oh, those little buggers can't get in here.
Yeah,
this is wonderful.
But somebody had to figure that out. And Walter Reed notes there was a barrel, and they had these little tiny minnows in the barrel of water. And I don't know why fish were in the water. I don't know. But the fish were eating the mosquito larvae. And the people that were around that water that had fish in it, like, oh, nobody's getting sick. Maybe that's something to it. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's pretty
that's
cool.
how it goes from there. Yeah.
Yeah. If you want to learn more about that, we will have some sources and books and stuff in our newsletter. So be sure to follow that. After construction ended in 1914, many West Indian workers who remained in Panama could not afford return passage and were not absorbed into the canal zone's peacetime economy. Their communities settled along the Caribbean coast. Their descendants form much of Panama's Afro-Caribbean population today.
And those communities where you have this blending of cultures, the history of the borderlands almost are really, really interesting.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
So what happened after the canal was finished?
What do you mean?
I mean, I'm handing you the next section.
Oh, okay. The canal opened on August 15th, 1914, 10 days after the outbreak of World War I. Why not, right?
Yeah. Screw it.
The SS Ancon made the first official transit, 47 miles in 9 hours and 40 minutes.
I feel like that's really good for people to memorize, just in case they want to wow their friends at a random trivia night.
Yeah.
What was the first boat to go through the Panama Canal?
Yeah. The commercial effect was immediate. A voyage from New York to San Francisco no longer required rounding Cape Horn, a journey of roughly 14,000 miles. That's too much.
I mean, you have to go literally all the way around
That's crazy.
South America, right? And then
Yeah,
like through what is it, the Drake Passage, which is the most dangerous waters in the world.
Yeah. Have you ever watched videos when ships go through that?
Yeah, it's crazy.
Wild. Yeah.
It's a completely different tangent, but like the old like wooden ships that could do.
I know.
Like what?
And then they kept going. They're like,
Crazy.
I mean, we're in it. Keep going.
Beats going back to England.
Yeah. The canal reduced that to approximately 5,000 miles. So yeah, that must have been huge. The savings in time and fuel applied to every category of cargo, every naval vessel, every troop transport.
The Panama Canal instantly transformed the economics of U.S. coastal and foreign trade. For American commercial interests, particularly the railroads and shipping companies that had lobbied for the canal, it created a competitive advantage that their European counterparts could not replicate. For the U.S. Navy, it meant that the Atlantic and Pacific fleets could now be considered a single deployable force, rather than two geographically isolated commands. Alfred Thayer Mahan, the naval theorist whose work has been cited by Roosevelt, McKinley, and Lodge throughout the 1890s, had argued that sea power required control of strategic choke points. The canal was, in strategic terms, the fulfillment of Mahan's vision. Alfred W. McCoy and Francisco Scarano, eds, Colonial Crucible, Empire in the Making of the Modern American State, University of Wisconsin Press, 2009.
The canal zone developed into a permanent military installation. The United States built airfields, fortifications, and bases throughout the zone's 10-mile width. Latin American military officers trained there at the School of the Americas, established in 1946. That School of the Americas goes to Fort Benning eventually.
Oh, okay.
And then Latin American officers go to School of the Americas.
Oh, cool.
There used to be, and I haven't been to Benning in a while, but there used to be an annual protest outside of the base because of the School of the Americas.
Really?
Because if you look at cartels, a lot of the members of cartels had ties to Schools of the Americas, especially.
Okay.
Yeah, so people stop teaching all the
doing
people
that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that is an interesting topic.
The U.S. is looking at reopening, things in Panama training bases, jungle training in Panama again.
Interesting.
Like the 80s again. It's crazy. I don't know. Maybe it's not crazy, but I was like, when I'm reading it, I'm like,
Nothing makes sense anymore.
We in a parallel universe? Like what?
Yeah.
Anyway, the zone had its own schools, hospitals, courts, police, and residential neighborhoods, a federally administered enclave inside a foreign nation.
By mid-century, the Canal Zone had become something unprecedented in U.S. foreign policy. A permanently garrisoned enclave in a sovereign nation, administered under conditions that the United States would never have accepted applied to itself. The zone's American residents, Zonians, lived in a federally administered territory with its own schools, hospitals, courts, and police force. Panama's government had nominal sovereignty over the Republic. Actual sovereignty over its most economically significant geography remained with Washington. CONIF, Panama and the United States, the Forced Alliance, 1992.
Canal toll revenues went to the United States government and Canal Zone administration. Panama received an annual fixed payment. The amount rose through the renegotiations over the decades. It did not receive a percentage of toll revenues until the 1977 Torrijos-Carter treaties. Between 1914 and 1977, the canal generated commercial proceeds that largely did not accrue in the country that the canal ran through. The question of what that arrangement represented, a fair exchange for U.S. construction investment and security guarantees, a structural imbalance, or something in between, has been answered differently by different governments, economists, and historians across the century. What is documented is the asymmetry of the terms and the length of time before they were renegotiated, which I think is a fair way of putting it, right? Like,
I think so. Like this kind of reminds me of like what we were talking about in Cuba, where the sugar plantations got all the love and everything like that. But here, obviously, it's just a much grander scale of things. Like the importance of the Panama Canal in the early 1900s for most of the century.
Yeah.
Is just, even today, it can't be understated. So the fact that
And-
they weren't getting a percentage of that was kind of crazy.
But see that other point too, where the investment in the construction of, right? Like, because Panama doesn't pay for that either,
Right. They just let them use the land.
Yeah. And
then
the US
own
pays
the
for the
land.
land. Yeah. So
Yeah.
I could see,
So
I
it's
could see
it's
both
interesting.
sides. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I
And
mean,
you-
I was just curious that in 1977 they were finally,
Yeah.
we deserve a percentage. I think is fine, right? Like
Yeah. Something
depending on what the percentage is, I don't know.
Yeah.
We mentioned last episode, and we'll probably mention in the future episodes as well, Smedley Butler,
Yeah.
Major General Smedley Butler, by the time he retired. His service record places him on the Isthmus of Panama in 1903 and 1904. So during the period around the Independence Declaration and its immediate aftermath, but not during time of construction. He was elsewhere in the Caribbean during these years. He served across the Caribbean and Central America for decades and held the rank of Major General, as we said. We read last episode a little bit of his polemical pamphlet, War is a Racket. A little part of that here. He doesn't. I'm actually not even going to read it because he doesn't even mention Panama.
No.
All that we know is that his service record puts him here for 2 years. So it's interesting what he was doing. Like, I mean, clearly had a role, I would say, in that I don't want to call it a revolution. It really wasn't, but
the independence movement.
Yeah, the independence movement.
Mm-hmm.
So that's interesting. So just kind of to recap, the canal opened in 1914, and it remains one of the most consequential infrastructure projects in history. Roughly 14,000 ships transited each year. Its expansion, completed in 2016, accommodates vessels that the original designers could not have imagined, which obviously makes sense. Ships have gotten so much larger.
Yeah.
We talked about a little bit in our discussions with the World Food Program and just the grain leaving the Black Sea and all that. Massive vessels. It's my single mind can't
handle it. Yeah, it's mind-boggling.
So it opened in 1914 inside a set of political and financial arrangements that would define the relationship between Panama and the United States for most of the 20th century. The canal zone ran through the physical center of the country, American-administered territory, with its own institutions and its own boundary enforced. The pattern established in Cuba, sovereignty formally recognized but conditioned by treaty, economic infrastructure concentrated in American hands, military presence available to maintain order, was here given a physical, permanent form. This wasn't a clause. It wasn't Cuba that could be invoked when needed. This was a zone with fences and a garrison, and like you said, schools and airstrips and all that kind of stuff that existed continuously. So how those arrangements came to be renegotiated and what it took to change them is a story that belongs to a later episode. What this episode has tried to trace is how they were made in the first place. The Treaty of 1846, the failed Colombian negotiation, the Revolution of 1903, the deal signed before Panama's own representatives could even reach Washington. And just a quick note here, this which I thought was really interesting. In 1921, the United States paid Colombia $25 million under the Thompson-Urrutia Treaty, partial compensation for the loss of the Isthmus. The payment had been proposed earlier but stalled for years. Theodore Roosevelt, while alive, called it blackmail. The Senate ratified it after his death, and Colombia used... Yes. Politics. They ratified it after his death, and Colombia used the funds in part to develop its oil sector.
Yeah.
Isn't that interesting? So the payment, I think this here is actually probably one of the most interesting things that we talk about. The payment acknowledged, at least implicitly, that something had gone wrong in 1903. What exactly and for whom remained and remains a matter of historical interpretation. So I think that's just like Panama's a super interesting history, and I don't know. I'm not going to do it, but if somebody wanted to go back and clipping all the times I said, that's interesting or that's crazy, I need to really up my lexicon in terms of words that have a wow factor. But so that's Panama. There was no, I mean, I don't want to say there was no food because how much food passes through the canal every year is just probably mind-boggling. But it did show how the U.S. continued to grow and use its military to hold on to things that it deemed important.
Yeah, and it is a military intervention on several occasions within Panama.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's interesting too how we see in Cuba, the U.S. joined the Spanish-American War at the tail end,
Mhm.
and then it comes in here and just is kind of there with the independence movement. It's like, yeah, we got you. Don't worry.
Yeah.
We'll help out
Yeah.
here. We can. This benefits us. We got you.
So we didn't talk about it in this episode, but I think we do a little bit in our last Panama episode. The Darien Gap is it's key area, it's key infrastructure. Like if you're looking at a map, you would circle this in red and put X's on it and be like, this is hard to
This
cross,
is it.
right?
Right. Right.
But it's part of this independence movement. It's going to slow down Colombian forces to get into Panama to even stop the independence movement, and the U.S. knows this. And it's interesting because if you look today and you're looking up Panama and you're looking up cartels and you're looking up anything along those lines, they're utilizing that same area to slow down troops and slow
That
down
makes
any
sense,
kind of
yeah.
like forward movement. Yeah. And I just think that's interesting. Some things we just see happening, right? Because it's already happened in history.
Yeah, no. And I mean, I keep wanting to talk about the Strait of Hormuz because of everything that's going on, but we don't want this to be a 7-hour episode. So that's our Banana Wars episode on Panama. We didn't mention the Banana Wars really at all this episode, but I think it's important to show how the U.S. is expanding more south into Central South America from the Caribbean. And it's they have infrastructure there that they're very hell-bent on keeping and protecting.
That's right. It is going to be a continuation of gunboat diplomacy, which is key to the Banana Wars.
Yeah. I want to give a huge shout out once again to Lord Nicholas Joseph Rotiel, who is an actual lord, for reading some of our scholarly reads and archival texts that we find. We very much appreciate him. And if you have any thoughts or comments or anything you'd like us to cover, please, you can email us at farmsandfrontlines@gmail.com. And like I said earlier, we will put all of our notes and sources and all that kind of stuff in our newsletter. So please follow that at farmsandfrontlines.substack.com.
Jess does a very good job on that newsletter.
I do try, so thank you. We'll see you next time.
All right, see ya.